Hello, grade 12, and welcome to the video of your first revision worksheet of semester 4. It is within the theme of natural disasters, and the title is One of the Strangest Natural Disasters of the 20th Century. In the following selection, the writer reports how scientists unlocked the secrets of the worst natural disaster in Cameroon, West Africa. Read it carefully and then answer the questions that follow. On the morning of August 22, 1986, a man hopped onto his bicycle and began riding from Woum, a village in Cameroon, towards the village of Nios. On the way, he noticed an antelope lying dead next to the road. A short distance later, he noticed 2 dead rats, and further on a dead dog and other dead animals. Soon the man came upon a group of huts. He decided to check if anyone there knew what had happened to the animals, but as he walked up to the huts, he was shocked to see dead bodies everywhere. He did not find a single person still alive in the huts. The man threw down his bicycle and ran all the way back to Woum. Okay, notice how the author began the article with a shocking scene, a very sad and shocking scene of dead bodies, of animals and people everywhere. Paragraph 2. Woum and Nios are in a remote part of Cameroon, meaning a very far place in Cameroon. So it took 2 days for a medical team to arrive after local officials called the governor to report the strange occurrence. The doctors found a catastrophe far greater than they could have imagined. Overnight, something had killed over 1,800 people, plus more than 3,000 cattle and countless wild animals, birds and insects, in short, every living creature for kilometers around. Paragraph 3. What could have caused so many deaths in such a short span of time? Notice the use of a question mark at the beginning of the paragraph. Here the author does this on purpose so as to make the reader anticipate the answer in the paragraph and the coming paragraphs. When news of the disaster reached the outside world, scientists from France, the United States, and other countries arrived to help the country's own scientists figure out what had happened. The remains of the victims offered few clues. There was no evidence of bleeding, physical trauma, or disease, and no sign of exposure to radiation, chemical weapons, or poison gas. The victims apparently just blacked out, fell over, and died. One of the first important clues was the distribution of the victims across the landscape. The deaths had all occurred within about 20 kilometers of Lake Nios. Both the number of victims and the percentage of fatalities, meaning the deaths, increased as the scientists got closer to the lake. So it has something to do with this lake. But it was the lake itself that provided the biggest and strangest clue of all. Its normally clear blue waters had turned a deep, murky red. And of course, when we know that when that happens, when color changes, a chemical change has taken place. Let's see what it turns out to be. Lake Nios, a roughly 0.6 kilometers squared in surface area and has a maximum depth of 2,207 meters. It is known as a crater lake. It was formed when the crater of a long extinct volcano was filled with water. Okay, so this was an active volcano a long time ago. Now it's extinct, it's no longer active. And you know, when a volcano erupts, it forms a crater, okay? A crater, which when it gathers water over time, it becomes a lake, of course. As the scientists started to collect evidence, they began to form a theory that centered around the large amount of CO2 in the lake. So there was a lot of carbon dioxide, which we know is a toxic gas. The volcano that formed Lake Nios may have been long extinct, but the magma chamber room that fed it was still active below the surface of the earth, and it was still releasing carbon dioxide gas, not just into Lake Nios, but into the surrounding environment as well. But that was unusual about Lake Nyos. But what was unusual about Lake Nyos was not that there was CO2 in the lake. That happens in lakes all over the world. What was unusual was that the CO2 had apparently never left. Instead of bubbling to the surface and dissipating into the air, going into the air, okay, the CO2 was accumulating at the bottom of the lake. Okay, so we expect gas like we see in soda drinks to bubble up and dissipate, go into the air. Instead of that, it was accumulating, meaning increasing at the bottom of the lake. As the scientists soon discovered, the waters of Lake Nyos are among the most still in the world. They're silent, they don't move. Tall hills surround the lake, blocking the wind and causing the lake to be unusually consistent in temperature from the surface to the bottom. And because Lake Nyos is in a tropical climate that remains hot all year round, the water temperature does not vary much from season to season either. Lastly, because the lake is so deep, even when the surface is disturbed, very little of the agitation finds its way to the lake floor. So all of those are reasons behind the disaster that happened. To confirm their theory, scientists had to find other instances of similar eruptions in the past. It did not take very long to find one, and they did not have to look very far either. 2 years earlier, on August 15, 1984, a loud boom was heard coming from Lake Monon, a crater lake just 98 kilometers southeast of Lake Nyos. In the hours that followed, 37 people mysteriously died, including a group of 17 people who died while walking to work when they came to a low point in the road, just a place where CO2 would have settled after being released from the lake. The incident was small enough so it did not attract much attention from the outside world. In the months following the disaster at Lake Nyos, the scientists continued to monitor to observe the lake's CO2 levels and concluded that their theory was correct. Eyewitness account from people who were high enough in the hills above the lake to survive the eruption described how the lake began bubbling strangely. Of course, when there are bubbles, we know there is gas. On August 17, causing a misty cloud to form above the surface of the water. Then, without warning, on August 22, the lake suddenly exploded. Water and gas shot about 100 meters into the air. The CO2 had taken up so much space in the lake that when it was finally released, the water level dropped more than 1 meter. By measuring the change in the depth, the scientists estimated that the lake had released 1.2 cubic kilometers of CO2, enough to fill 10 football stadiums in as little as 20 seconds. So that's a lot of toxic gas. Finally, cattle herders grazed their animals on the hills above Lake Nyos, and after the lake erupted as much as 80% of its massive store of CO2 in one big burst, dead cattle were found as high as 90 meters above the lake, indicating that the suffocating, they choked on this gas, cloud shot at least that high before settling back into the surface. Then the gas poured over the crater's edge into the valleys below, traveling at an estimated 75 kilometers per hour. For people living in the villages closest to the lake, death was almost inevitable. So now this mystery was unraveled. It was solved. We know that it all had to do with a huge amount of CO2 that was accumulating at the bottom of a long extinct volcano, and it suddenly erupted and caused all this chaos. Now let's answer the questions together. In reference to paragraph 2, what was shocking about the doctor's findings? Okay, the doctors were shocked by the huge number of deaths among humans and animals. Okay, 1,800 people and 3,000 cattle, and by the short time which the whole event had occurred. This was what was shocking about it. Identify two main clues the remains of Nios's victims could provide to scientists. First, the remains revealed no physical violence, no disease, no radiation, chemical weapons, or poisonous gas. Second, the way they were distributed within 20 kilometers of Lake Nios helped scientists relate the strange occurrence to the lake itself. Other possible clues: people died directly without any physical suffering or after fainting. Number 3, explain how Lake Nios's nature contributed to the disaster. First, the lake itself was formed by an extinct volcano, as we said, the fact that led to the existence of an active magma chamber, a room. Second, the lake's water is consistently hot. Third, the depth of the lake, 207 meters, keeps the deep water undisturbed. All those factors were behind the accumulation or the increase of CO2 at the bottom of the lake, which later caused the eruption of the poisonous cloud. Of course, the cloud of CO2. Infer or conclude one measure that the locals and another that the government could have taken to avoid the devastating consequences of the Nios disaster. The government could have taken the eruption of Lake Monoun more seriously, the one that happened previously, to detect similar occurrences. Maybe because not many people, even though people died, but not as many people as to raise eyebrows and for people to investigate. Okay, so the Lake Monoun event also should have been taken more seriously. Second, the local people should have taken the strange bubbles from the lake. They should have taken that seriously 5 days before the eruption into consideration and should have informed the government as soon as the phenomenon occurred. If the two clues were seriously studied or at least reported, the disaster could have been avoided. I mean, why would a lake suddenly start bubbling? Something is bubbling, something's about to explode. Okay, so that should have been reported also by the citizens. Now let's go to the skills questions. What two different nouns best reflect the mood of paragraph 1? And as we said previously, when we speak of the mood is related to the reader. What this piece of writing evokes in you as a reader. And of course, it's expressed as a noun. Okay, the attitude or the tone is related to the author's view and it's expressed as an adjective, while the mood is related to how you feel as a reader and it's expressed as a noun. So what two different nouns does reflect the mood in paragraph 1? What mood is evoked? Of course, after reading it, it's quite a somber image. The mood that dominates paragraph 1 is that of horror, panic, eagerness, and curiosity. Remember, you have to write them as nouns. The images of dead bodies, why? Now you need to tell me why. Take clues or pieces of evidence from the paragraph. The images of dead bodies everywhere and the repetition of the word dead, lying dead, two dead rats, dead dog, dead animals, and dead bodies cause a mood of horror and panic. Second, since no single clue was mentioned in the paragraph, we saw this horrific scene, but we don't know what it is, so that evokes a mood of maybe curiosity and eagerness to know what is behind this catastrophe. Now identify two purposes of the opening question in paragraph 3. We talked about that while I was reading the text. What could have caused so many deaths? What two purposes lie behind this question? First, the question introduces the main idea of the paragraph, of course, acting like a topic sentence, or the focus of the whole selection, or the paragraph, investigating the causes of death. Second, it prepares the reader for the answer or the reasons behind that strange disaster, which will be presented, of course, in the paragraph and the coming paragraphs, as I said earlier. What pattern of organization is used in paragraph 8 within the paragraph? Well, it's obvious the moment you look at it. You have a lot of dates: August 11, August 22, okay, 20 seconds. Then, all words related to time or chronological order. So the pattern is obviously chronological or time order. You can use one of the words because the writer provides details and events using a time sequence. He starts with the event of monitoring the lake's CO2 that confirmed the scientist's theory mentioned before. Then he lists past events in a time order, eyewitnessing the strange bubbling of the lake, happening of the explosion, measuring the change in the lake's depth, etc. The clues that help reveal the pattern are in the months following, August 17, then August 22, when, and 20 seconds. All words, clues related to chronological or time order. Now refer to paragraphs 2, 7, and 8 to fill in the table below with the main event related to each date provided. Write your answers as phrases, please, no complete sentences. And don't forget to copy the table, of course, onto your booklet. This one was mentioned directly. We had at the beginning, August 24, 1986. What happened? The arrival of the doctors in the disaster area of Nios, or the discovery of how huge the catastrophe was in Nios. Now this one, it was, you had to infer. They said 2 years earlier on August 15, but they didn't mention this. But we were speaking about this event and we said 2 years earlier on August 15, so we inferred that this is where the eruption, they told us that the eruption of Lake Monoun happened 2 years earlier on August 15, okay, in the text. So we infer that on this date, eruption of Lake Monoun and the death of 37 people occurred. Months after August 22nd, 1986, moving on in the paragraphs, okay, they said months later, what happened? Continuity of monitoring carbon dioxide by the scientist, or the collection of eyewitnesses' accounts about the strange bubbling of the lake. Okay, so as you notice, some of the dates have to be inferred. They are not directly stated. Now the following statements are false because they misinterpret the meaning stated or conveyed in the selection above. Rewrite them correctly. The local scientists work hard to unlock the mystery of Lake Nios, of Nios's disaster. The local and international scientists work hard to unlock the mystery of Nios. 2. By measuring the temperature of the lake, the scientists estimated how much CO2 was released. No. By measuring the change in the depth of the lake, the scientists estimated how much CO2 was released. Part E, we have to scan paragraphs 1, 3, and 6 to find words and phrases that almost have the following meaning. Small and simple roofed shelters, of course, when we read, we see they talked about huts, okay? Small homes, okay? Huts. Number 2, body wound or shock produced by violence, trauma, of course, trauma. To lose consciousness, blackout. Characterized by humidity and heat, tropical. You know the tropical climate that in the tropical area, the equator area, in places like Central Africa and Brazil. Okay, so this is it for worksheet number 1. If you have any further questions, please write them down and you can ask them to me during class. See you.